Rejected by the husband she crossed a continent to marry, widowed mother Emma Mitchell finds unexpected purpose as a frontier doctor's apprentice in a town divided by tradition and prejudice. Amid the harsh beauty of Dakota Territory, she must confront powerful opposition to her unconventional role and navigate small-town politics, risking not only her newfound independence, but also the unexpected love blooming between her and the doctor who sees her potential, all while fighting for her place in a community that questions a woman's right to heal. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel, it's free, and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. Chapter 1. Emma Mitchell clutched her 6-month-old twins closer as the stagecoach rattled into Riverdale, snow swirling around them like dancing ghosts. The letters in her pocket promised a new beginning, a husband, security, and hope. But when she stepped down into the bitter Dakota winter, the man whose words had drawn her across a continent took one look at her babies and his face hardened with unmistakable rejection. "You didn't mention children in your letters," Oliver Harper said coldly, stepping back as though to distance himself from an unwelcome obligation. In that moment, as curious townsfolk gathered to witness her humiliation, Emma realized she had spent her last dollar on a promise that had just turned to ash. "I most certainly did," Emma replied, struggling to keep her voice steady despite the sinking feeling in her stomach. "In my second letter, I explained that I was recently widowed with infant twins." "I received no such information," Oliver insisted, his tone suggesting he believed she had deliberately deceived him. The wind howled around them, as bitter as the disappointment etching itself across Emma's features. Little Sarah fussed against her shoulder while James slept, blissfully unaware of their precarious situation. At 24, Emma had already weathered more storms than most twice her age. The war taking her brother, illness claiming her parents, and her husband of barely a year crushed in a factory accident just months before the twins were born. "What am I to do then?" she asked, fighting to maintain her composure as onlookers gathered, their curious stares adding to her humiliation. "That's hardly my concern," Harper replied, though a flicker of discomfort crossed his face at the attention they were drawing. He lowered his voice. "There's a small hotel down the street. I'll pay for 2 nights lodging. After that, you'll need to make other arrangements." Before Emma could respond, a woman pushed through the small crowd that had gathered. Middle-aged with gray-streaked hair and a practical dress beneath her heavy coat, she approached with concern etched on her kind face. "Everything all right here, Oliver?" she asked, though her gaze was fixed on Emma and the distressed twins. "A misunderstanding, Mrs. Winters," Harper replied stiffly. "Mrs. Mitchell failed to mention certain complications in our correspondence." Mrs. Winters' eyes narrowed slightly at Harper's tone, but her expression remained polite. "I see." She turned to Emma, her face softening. "Those little ones are near frozen, poor things. The hotel's not fit for babies. Drafty old place. I'm Ruth Winters. I run the boarding house just up the street. We have a room that would suit you and the little ones better." Emma's eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "Thank you, but I'm afraid I have limited funds for lodging." "We can discuss that later," Ruth said firmly. "Right now, those babies need warmth, and I'd wager you could use a hot meal yourself." Oliver Harper cleared his throat. "As I was saying, I'll cover 2 nights lodging." "That's very generous of you, Oliver," Ruth interrupted, her tone suggesting it was anything but. "I'm sure your conscience is much relieved." She turned back to Emma. "Come along, dear. My son can bring your trunk." Emma found herself following Ruth Winters away from the stagecoach stop, away from Oliver Harper and his broken promises, and toward an uncertain future in a town where she knew no one. The twins' cries had subsided to whimpers, small puffs of breath visible in the cold air. Ruth's boarding house was a large 2-story structure with a wide porch and windows glowing warmly against the gathering dusk. Inside, the entryway opened to a comfortable sitting room where a fire crackled in the hearth. The smell of stew and fresh bread filled the air, making Emma's stomach clench with hunger. "Ethan," Ruth called, "come help with this lady's trunk." A young man of perhaps 17 appeared, wiping his hands on a cloth. He took in the scene, Emma with the twins, his mother's determined expression, and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Is it still at the stage?" "Right where that fool Harper left it," Ruth confirmed, helping Emma remove her coat while somehow managing to support her arm that held little James. After Ethan departed, Ruth guided Emma to a rocking chair near the fire. "Now then, Let me hold one of these little angels while you warm up." Too exhausted to protest, Emma surrendered Sarah to the older woman's capable hands. Ruth cooed to the baby while expertly checking her for any signs of cold exposure. "They seem healthy despite the journey," Ruth pronounced. "How old?" 6 months next week," Emma replied, relaxing incrementally in the chair's gentle motion and the room's blessed warmth. "They were born early and small, but they've grown well." The front door opened, bringing a blast of cold air as Ethan returned with Emma's trunk. Another figure followed him inside, a tall man in a heavy coat dusted with snow, medical bag in hand. "Back so soon, Daniel?" Ruth asked. "Thompson's boy's fever broke," the man replied, removing his hat to reveal dark hair threaded with silver and a face lined by time and weather, yet handsome in its strong features. His eyes, a deep blue that reminded Emma of summer skies, moved from Ruth to Emma and the babies with undisguised curiosity. "Dr. Daniel Winter," Ruth said by way of introduction. "My brother-in-law. Daniel, this is Mrs. Emma Mitchell and her twins, Sarah and James. They've had quite the welcome to Riverdale, I'm afraid." Dr. Winters hung his coat on a peg by the door, approaching with a practiced eye that seemed to take in Emma's pale exhaustion and the baby's condition in one sweeping glance. "Mrs. Mitchell was Oliver Harper's intended," Ruth continued, her tone conveying volumes. "Was?" Dr. Winters raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Harper was unprepared for children," Emma said quietly, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Understanding dawned in the doctor's eyes, followed by something that might have been anger, quickly masked. "I see." He moved closer, bending slightly to observe James in Emma's arms. "May I? Traveling can be hard on little ones." Emma nodded, allowing the doctor to examine her son with gentle, competent hands. His touch was professional, yet somehow comforting, as he checked the baby's lungs, temperature, and reflexes. "Healthy little fellow," he pronounced, then repeated the examination with Sarah, who had calmed in Ruth's arms. "Both seem no worse for the journey, though I'd recommend plenty of warmth, rest, and regular feeding to help them recover." Emma sat by the fire, watching this stranger tend to her children with unexpected gentleness, and wondered what turn her life would take now in this frontier town where her journey had begun with rejection. For the first time since arriving, a small seed of hope took root in her heart. Perhaps Riverdale still held possibilities she couldn't yet imagine. Chapter 2. Morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the blue wallpaper of the boarding house room. Emma woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the twins' soft breathing beside her brought reality rushing back. The events of yesterday, the humiliating rejection, Ruth Winter's kindness, the doctor's thoughtful gaze, all settled over her like the patchwork quilt covering her bed. A soft knock at the door interrupted her preparations for the day. Ruth entered carrying a tray with steaming coffee, fresh bread, and preserves. "Thought you might prefer breakfast up here this morning," she said, setting the tray on a small table. "Those little ones still sleeping?" Emma nodded gratefully. "They rarely sleep this long. The journey must have exhausted them." "Travel's hard on the smallest one," Ruth agreed, pouring coffee into a delicate cup. "I've prepared bottles for when they wake. My Ethan found your formula supplies in your trunk. Hope you don't mind." "Of course not. Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Winters." Emma hesitated, then voiced the question that had plagued her through the night. "I must ask, what does your brother-in-law charge for medical consultations?" Ruth's eyebrows rose. "Are the babies ill?" "No, but his examination yesterday. I have little money, but I insist on paying my debts." Ruth's expression softened. Daniel wouldn't dream of charging for that. He was simply ensuring the twins were well after their journey. Emma's pride bristled despite her gratitude. "I don't seek charity, Mrs. Winters. And none is being offered," Ruth replied firmly. "Merely neighborliness, something in short supply from certain quarters of Riverdale, it seems." Her tone made clear she referred to Oliver Harper's rejection. Emma sipped her coffee, gathering courage for her next question. "I must inquire about your rates for lodging as well. Mr. Harper mentioned paying for 2 nights, but—" "Harper sent money around this morning by his shop boy," Ruth interrupted. "Paid for a week, actually, though he included a note saying he told you differently." She sniffed disapprovingly. "Trying to pressure you into leaving sooner, I expect. Shame doesn't sit well on some men's shoulders." "A week?" Emma's mind raced. 7 days to determine her next steps. To find employment or another solution in a town where her introduction had been public humiliation, where she knew no one except the kind woman before her and the enigmatic doctor who had treated her children with unexpected gentleness. A week gives you time to consider options, Ruth continued, seemingly reading Emma's thoughts. Riverdale's growing. There might be opportunities for a capable woman. I was a teacher before I married, Emma admitted, though I doubt any school would hire a woman with infant twins. Perhaps not the school, Ruth acknowledged, but there are families who might value education for their children. Ranchers and farmers whose homesteads lie too far from town for daily attendance. This possibility hadn't occurred to Emma. A flicker of hope kindled in her chest, quickly tempered by practicality. Even so, I would need accommodation that allows for the twins, and I doubt private tutoring would provide enough for rent and necessities. Ruth hesitated, then spoke carefully. There is another possibility, though I hesitate to mention it so soon after recent disappointments. Emma steeled herself. Please speak plainly. There are men in this territory, respectable, established men, who would value a wife with your qualities. Men who, unlike Oliver Harper, understand that children are a blessing, not a burden. The prospect of another arranged marriage made Emma's stomach clench, but she forced herself to consider it objectively. Her primary responsibility was to her children. If another match offered them security and a proper home, could she refuse based on her own wounded pride? Before Emma could respond, Sarah began to fuss, her cries quickly escalating, as was her habit. James would soon follow. The twins rarely allowed one to command attention for long. Emma moved to the bed, lifting Sarah and murmuring soothing words while casting an apologetic glance at Ruth. I'll bring up those bottles, Ruth said, rising, and perhaps you join us downstairs once these little ones are settled. The parlor gets lovely morning light, and my other boarders would welcome the company. After Ruth departed, Emma changed and fed the twins, her mind turning over possibilities. Tutoring might provide some income, but likely not enough. Another marriage could offer stability, but after Harper's rejection, the thought made her chest tighten with anxiety. And beneath these practical concerns lay a deeper fear, that she had made a terrible mistake coming to Dakota territory, risking her children's well-being on promises penned by a stranger. Later that afternoon, as the twins slept, Ruth offered to watch them while Emma visited Dr. Winter's practice. They'll be fine with me, she assured Emma, and you'll think more clearly without them for an hour or two. Emma hadn't been separated from her babies since their birth, and the prospect both worried and relieved her. Worry won briefly until Ruth demonstrated her obvious competence with infants, settling both twins in a cradle she'd had Ethan bring down from the attic. My sister, Daniel's wife, had her babies in this, Ruth explained softly as she gently rocked the cradle. It's good to see it used again. This second reference to the doctor's family stirred Emma's curiosity further, but she refrained from prying. Instead, she thanked Ruth and set out for the doctor's office. Located on Riverdale's main street just past the church, the building was larger than Emma expected, a well-maintained two-story structure with Dr. Daniel Winters, physician and surgeon, painted on a wooden sign above the door. A separate entrance at the side presumably led to the adjoining residence. Nancy Cooper, the doctor's nurse, greeted Emma and explained that Dr. Winters had mentioned she might be joining their practice. We've needed help since Mrs. Bennett left to care for her ailing mother in Minnesota. He's offered a position, Emma clarified, though I haven't accepted yet. I know little about medical practice. Nancy smiled reassuringly. Most of the work involves organization and common sense, which Dr. Winters says teachers have in abundance. Medical knowledge comes with time. When Dr. Winters arrived, he gave Emma a tour of both the medical practice and the adjoining residence. The house was surprisingly large and well-appointed, clearly designed for a family much larger than a single man. Upstairs, a nursery still furnished with a crib and small bed caught Emma's attention. This would be suitable for your twins as they grow, he said, his voice carefully neutral. It has southern exposure, warm in winter, catches the breeze in summer. Emma walked to the window, noting the view of a small garden now dormant under snow. The nursery was cheerful despite its disuse, with faded circus animals painted along one wall and colorful quilts folded neatly at the foot of the small bed. This had been a room created with love, she realized, not merely furnished, but designed to delight its occupants. It's perfect, she said softly, then turned to face him directly. Dr. Winters, May I ask a personal question? He seemed to brace himself but nodded. Your sister-in-law mentioned a cradle that belonged to your wife. And this nursery, she hesitated, unsure how to continue without causing pain. You're wondering about my family, he finished for her. It's a natural question, given I'm offering you residence in a home clearly built for children. He drew a deep breath. My wife Elizabeth and our children, Samuel and Grace, died of scarlet fever 5 years ago. I was attending patients in outlying homesteads during a particularly harsh winter. By the time I returned, he left the sentence unfinished, the conclusion evident. I'm so sorry, Emma said, understanding now the shadow she'd glimpsed in his eyes. It was a difficult time, he acknowledged, his composure admirable despite the obvious pain. For years, I maintained this house exactly as they left it. Recently, I've come to realize Elizabeth would have hated seeing rooms meant for living left unused out of grief. Emma nodded, moved by his honesty. It's a beautiful home. Your wife had excellent taste. She did, he agreed with the ghost of a smile, and a practical nature that would approve of its use by someone who needs it. He gestured toward the stairs. There's more to see if you wish, or we can discuss terms if you've seen enough. I believe I've seen what I need to, Emma replied. The position seems well suited to my situation, and the accommodation is more than generous. She paused, wanting to be completely transparent. I should mention that while I'm a quick learner, my experience with medical matters is limited to basic first aid and caring for my children through minor illnesses. As I said, medical knowledge can be acquired, Dr. Winters assured her. Nancy will assist with patient care until you're comfortable taking on those duties. Initially, I need someone to manage the office, prepare simple tinctures and remedies from established formulas, and maintain order in both house and practice. They proceeded to discuss specifics, hours, compensation, duties, and when Emma might begin. The terms were more than fair, offering security she hadn't dared hope for just 24 hours earlier. Yet beneath her gratitude lay an unsettling question. Was she accepting this position because it truly suited her, or because desperate circumstances left her no choice? As if sensing her internal conflict, Dr. Winters said quietly, "Take until tomorrow to consider, Mrs. Mitchell. This decision affects not only you but your children. I wouldn't rush you into something of such consequence." His consideration touched her. How different from Oliver Harper's cold dismissal was this man's thoughtful respect for her autonomy, even knowing her precarious situation. "Thank you, doctor. I shall give you my answer tomorrow." Emma extended her hand, which he took briefly in a formal handshake. "Regardless of my decision, your kindness has been unexpected." His eyes held hers for a moment. "Sometimes the journey we plan takes an unexpected turn, Mrs. Mitchell. In my experience, those detours often lead exactly where we need to go, though we couldn't have known it when we set out." As Emma walked back to the boarding house through the crisp afternoon air, his words echoed in her mind. Her carefully planned future with Oliver Harper had crumbled upon arrival. Yet within 24 hours, another path had opened, one that offered independence rather than subservience, partnership rather than patronage. By the time she reached Ruth's porch, her decision was made. The unexpected proposal, not of marriage but of meaningful work and respect, had opened a door she hadn't even known to look for. Tomorrow she would step through it. Chapter 3. Emma's first week at Dr. Winters' practice passed in a blur of new routines and adjustments. She had accepted the position the morning after their tour, much to Ruth Winters' approval. By week's end, she and the twins were comfortably settled in the doctor's residence, occupying rooms unused since tragedy had emptied them 5 years prior. The early March weather remained stubbornly cold, but inside the doctor's home, warmth prevailed. Emma established a nursery in the cheerful room with circus animals painted on the walls, arranging the twins' meager belongings alongside the toys and furnishings that had belonged to Samuel and Grace Winters. She had offered to store these mementos, but Dr. Winters had shaken his head. "They were meant to be used," he'd said simply. "Let them serve their purpose again." On this particular morning, Emma rose before dawn, as had become her habit. The twins still slept, their schedule gradually adjusting to the rhythms of the household. She dressed quickly in the practical navy skirt and white shirtwaist that had become her work uniform, then padded downstairs to prepare breakfast before the day's appointments began. She found Dr. Winters already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. He wore a crisp white shirt, his suit jacket and tie still hanging on the hook by the back door. "You're up early," she observed, reaching for the flour canister. She had discovered the doctor preferred biscuits to toast, a preference she was happy to accommodate given his generosity. "Couldn't sleep," he replied, pouring coffee into 2 cups and setting one on the table for her. "Henderson Farms sent word late last night. Mary's time is near. First baby." He sipped his coffee, watching as Emma efficiently mixed biscuit dough. "I thought I might ride out this morning to check on her." Emma nodded, cutting butter into the flour with practiced movements. "Will you be gone all day?" "Depends on her progress. First babies often take their time." He hesitated. "I've asked Nancy to come in, but she can only stay until noon. Her husband needs her help with a sick cow." "I'll manage the office," Emma assured him, shaping the dough into rounds and placing them on a baking sheet. She had quickly mastered the filing system and basic office procedures, though she remained hesitant about medical matters. "Should I reschedule this afternoon's appointments?" Dr. Winters considered this. "Only Mrs. Jenkins. She's coming for her monthly tonic for nerves. Nothing urgent. The others are mostly dressing changes and follow-ups. I'd rather not postpone." Emma slid the biscuits into the oven, then joined him at the table, warming her hands around the coffee cup. "I'll need instructions for the dressing changes. Simple ones only. I've noted the procedures in each patient file." His confidence in her abilities warmed her more than the coffee. "You've learned quickly these past weeks." "I've had an excellent teacher," she replied, then blushed slightly at his appreciative smile. Their morning routine had developed an easy familiarity that still surprised Emma. Dr. Winters breakfasted with her, then checked on the twins when they woke while she prepared bottles. He never seemed to mind the disruption they brought to his orderly bachelor existence. On the contrary, he often found excuses to interact with them, examining their developing skills with a doctor's eye, but also with genuine interest. This morning followed the pattern until a knock at the back door signaled the arrival of Ethan Winters, Ruth's son, who had come to drive the doctor to the Henderson farm. "I'll likely return by supper," Dr. Winters told Emma, as he gathered his medical bag and heavy coat. "Send word with Ethan if any emergencies arise." After his departure, Emma settled into the day's tasks. The twins cooperated by napping longer than usual, allowing her to organize patient files and prepare the examination rooms before Nancy Cooper arrived to assist with morning appointments. "You're a natural at this," Nancy commented as they worked. The older woman had initially seemed wary of Emma, perhaps concerned about being replaced, but had warmed considerably upon realizing Emma had no desire to usurp her position. "Most take months to learn what you've mastered in weeks. Teaching requires organization," Emma replied, labeling newly prepared tinctures of willow bark for fever and chamomile for digestive complaints. "And raising twins demands efficiency." Nancy laughed, checking the supply of clean bandages. "True enough. Speaking of the little ones, they're thriving here. Some whispered you might not manage both work and motherhood, but you've proven them wrong." Emma stiffened slightly. "Some meaning Olivia Harper, I presume." Nancy had the grace to look embarrassed. Gossip travels in small towns. Olivia Harper was quite vocal about her brother's disappointment. "I imagine she was," Emma said dryly. She had encountered Oliver Harper's sister only once since her arrival, at Sunday services where the woman had pointedly avoided introducing her to the church's social circle. The rejection had stung, though Emma pretended indifference. "Pay her no mind," Nancy advised. "The Harpers fancy themselves Riverdale royalty since their family founded the Mercantile 30 years ago. But Dr. Winters has more respect in this town than all the Harpers combined." The morning passed with a steady stream of patients. A rancher with a deep cut from mending fences, a child with an ear infection, an expectant mother seeking reassurance about her advancing pregnancy. Nancy handled most medical aspects while Emma managed records, payments, and dispensing prescribed remedies. At noon, Nancy departed regretfully. "I'd stay if I could, but Thomas is hopeless with sick animals. If I don't help, we'll lose a valuable milking cow." "We'll manage," Emma assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at her confidence as the afternoon patients began arriving. The first 2 appointments proceeded smoothly, both simple dressing changes that followed Dr. Winters' detailed instructions exactly. Emma was just beginning to relax when the bell above the office door jangled, and Oliver Harper himself entered, supporting an ashen-faced young man whose right hand was wrapped in a blood-soaked cloth. "My clerk," Harper announced without preamble, sliced his palm-opening crates. "Where's Winters?" Emma straightened, refusing to be intimidated by the man who had so publicly humiliated her. Dr. Winters is attending a birth at the Henderson farm. I can help or send for him if necessary. Harper's expression darkened with recognition as he properly looked at her for the first time. You? What are you doing here? Mrs. Mitchell is my assistant, came a deep voice from behind them. Dr. Winters stood in the doorway, his coat dusted with snow, medical bag in hand, and fully qualified to assess whether a situation requires my immediate attention. Relief flooded Emma, followed quickly by concern. The Henderson baby? Delivered safely an hour ago. Mother and daughter are doing well. His gaze shifted to the injured clerk. Let's examine that hand. Harper withdrew as Dr. Winters took charge, leading the young man to an examination room. Emma followed with clean bandages and instruments, leaving the merchant standing awkwardly in the waiting area. The injury proved serious but not life-threatening. A deep laceration requiring several stitches, but no damage to tendons or nerves. Emma assisted competently, handing instruments, preparing suture materials, and cleaning the wound as directed. The clerk, whose name was Thomas Nichols, remained stoic throughout the procedure, thanking them profusely once his hand was neatly bandaged. You'll need to rest that hand for at least 3 days, Dr. Winters instructed. No lifting, no writing, minimal movement. Mrs. Mitchell will prepare a tincture for pain. As Emma mixed the prescribed remedy, she overheard Harper's protests in the waiting room. 3 days without my clerk? Impossible. The spring shipments arrive tomorrow. Infection is a greater threat than delayed inventory, Dr. Winters replied firmly. Unless you prefer to risk losing him permanently to blood poisoning. Emma handed the tincture to young Nichols along with written instructions. 2 drops in water every 4 hours as needed for pain, she explained. Return in 3 days for Dr. Winters to examine the wound. Sooner if you notice increased redness, swelling, or fever. After the clerk departed, Harper lingered, his discomfort evident as he shifted his weight from foot to foot. Finally, he cleared his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, I owe you an apology. Emma froze in the act of recording the treatment in the patient ledger. Of all the things she had expected from Oliver Harper, an apology ranked least likely. My behavior upon your arrival was ungentlemanly, he continued stiffly. I've since learned that your letter explaining the children's existence did indeed arrive, but was misplaced by my sister during a bout of influenza. She found it last week among papers she had set aside while ill. Emma set down her pen carefully. I see. Had I known about the twins from the beginning, I might have... He stopped, perhaps realizing no version of that sentence improved his standing. You might have what, Mr. Harper? Emma's voice remained steady despite the anger simmering beneath her composed exterior. Rejected me by letter instead of in person? Saved us both the embarrassment of a public scene? Harper flushed. I merely meant, I believe Mrs. Mitchell understands your meaning perfectly, Dr. Winters interrupted, his tone deceptively mild, though Emma noted the tension in his jaw. Your apology is noted. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have other patients waiting. No other patients waited, in fact, but Harper didn't challenge the claim. With a stiff nod, he departed, the bell jangling discordantly in his wake. Silence stretched between them until Emma spoke. Thank you for your timely return, Doctor. Fortuitous timing, he agreed, removing his coat. Though from what I observed, you were handling Harper quite capably on your own. Harper doesn't concern me, Emma replied, returning to her record-keeping. Though I admit I was relieved to have your expertise for his clerk's injury. A deep laceration requires more skill than I currently possess. Dr. Winters studied her for a moment, then made a decision. Perhaps it's time to expand your medical training beyond basic procedures. You've mastered the administrative aspects more quickly than I anticipated. Emma looked up in surprise. Would you teach me more advanced skills? If you're willing to learn, he replied. Your steady hands and attention to detail would serve you well in medical practice, and having another trained person in Riverdale would benefit the community, especially when I'm called away on distant cases. The offer stirred something in Emma that had lain dormant since her teaching days. Intellectual curiosity, the satisfaction of mastering new knowledge. I would be honored to learn whatever you're willing to teach, she said sincerely. His expression warmed. We'll begin tomorrow then. Basic anatomy first, then common ailments and treatments. He glanced at the clock on the wall. For now, I believe it's time to check on your children. They've been remarkably quiet all afternoon. Emma started realizing the twins had indeed slept much longer than usual. Together, they walked through the connecting passage to the residence. Finding both babies awake, but contentedly babbling to each other in their crib. The sight of the normally active twins peacefully entertaining themselves brought a smile to Emma's face. "They're becoming more aware of each other," Dr. Winters observed. "An advantage of twins. Built-in companionship," Emma agreed. "And double the mischief once they become mobile," she added, lifting Sarah, who immediately reached for the doctor's watch chain, a favorite fascination. He chuckled, not minding the small fingers grasping the gold links. "I suspect these two will keep us both on our toes in the coming months." The casual us sent an unexpected warmth through Emma. In the weeks since accepting the position, Dr. Winters had gradually shifted from formal employer to something approaching a friend. He respected her intelligence, valued her contributions to his practice, and most surprisingly, showed genuine interest in her children's development. The remainder of the afternoon passed pleasantly as Emma prepared supper, while Dr. Winters entertained the twins in the kitchen. He had fashioned a safe enclosure from a large wooden box lined with blankets, allowing them freedom to practice sitting up while containing their increasing attempts at mobility. "Samuel used to escape every containment we devised," he remarked, helping James maintain his precarious balance. By 10 months, he could scale barriers twice his height. Emma noted how naturally he now shared memories of his children, a stark change from the guarded silence of her first weeks. "James shows similar determination," she replied. "Sarah is more cautious, but equally persistent in her own way. Different temperaments from the beginning." Dr. Winters nodded. "Grace was our thinker, observed everything carefully before attempting anything. Samuel leaped first and considered consequences later, if at all." Emma smiled, stirring the beef stew simmering on the stove. "My brother William was the same, always rushing headlong into adventure. I was forever patching his scrapes and bruises." "Your first medical experience?" he asked, a teasing light in his eyes. "I suppose it was," she laughed, though Will was a reluctant patient at best. Their conversation continued through supper, comfortable and unforced. Emma described her childhood in Pennsylvania, her years teaching at a small school in Philadelphia, her brief marriage to James Mitchell Sr. Dr. Winters shared stories of his medical training, his decision to practice in Dakota Territory rather than Boston, his courtship of Elizabeth Winters, who had followed him west despite her wealthy family's objections. "She never regretted it," he said, a bittersweet smile crossing his features. "Even during the harshest winters, the loneliest times when I was called away for days to remote homesteads, she maintained that our life here had meaning her Boston existence lacked." "She sounds remarkable," Emma said gently. "She was." He gazed into the fire for a long moment, then visibly returned to the present. "As are you, Mrs. Mitchell. Few women would have shown your resilience in the face of Harper's rejection, let alone built a new life so quickly." "Necessity is a powerful motivator," Emma replied, and then added softly, "and I had help. Your kindness made all the difference." Their eyes met across the table, something unspoken passing between them. The moment lingered until Sarah broke it with a demanding cry for attention. As Emma tended to the twins' bedtime routine later that evening, her thoughts returned to that moment and the gradual transformation of her circumstances. 1 month ago, she had departed Philadelphia with little hope beyond securing basic survival for her children. She had arrived in Riverdale to rejection and seeming disaster, yet somehow she now found herself in a comfortable home with meaningful work, learning new skills under the guidance of a man who respected her intelligence and accepted, even welcomed, her children. Was this merely fortunate coincidence, she wondered, or something more deliberate? The question followed her into dreams where Daniel Winters' blue eyes held promises she dared not interpret while awake. Morning brought a fresh perspective and new developments. Emma descended to the kitchen to find Dr. Winters already dressed for the day, a letter open before him at the breakfast table. "New?" she inquired, moving to prepare coffee. "From the Territorial Medical Board," he confirmed. "They're sending an inspector next month to evaluate rural practices. Standard procedure, but it means additional preparation." Emma nodded, mentally calculating what records would need organizing. "We'll be ready. With your help, certainly." He hesitated, then continued. "The inspector will expect a properly qualified assistant, someone with documented training." She paused in measuring coffee grounds. "I have no formal medical training, but you have education and intelligence," he countered, "and I have authority to train apprentices. With your permission, I'd like to register you officially as my medical apprentice. It would formalize the teaching I proposed yesterday." The offer startled her. Are women permitted as medical apprentices? The territorial statutes don't specify gender requirements for apprenticeship, he replied. Several female physicians practice in larger settlements farther east, all initially trained through similar arrangements. Emma considered the implications as she prepared breakfast. Medical apprenticeship represented a significant commitment beyond her current duties. More responsibility, more learning, perhaps eventually a professional identity beyond widow or mother. This isn't an obligation, Dr. Winters added, sensing her hesitation. Merely an opportunity if you wish to pursue it. Emma set a plate of eggs before him, her decision forming. I accept gratefully, though I expect the good people of Riverdale may have opinions about a woman in such a role. Undoubtedly, he agreed with a wry smile, but they'll adapt, as they have to your presence here. Results speak louder than prejudice in frontier medicine. As they finished breakfast, a knock at the office door signaled the day's first patient. Emma rose to answer it, her step lighter than it had been in months. The path ahead remained uncertain, with challenges she could only dimly foresee. But for the first time since being widowed, she faced the future with something beyond resignation, with genuine hope and purpose. Daniel Winters watched her go, a complex emotion crossing his features before he too rose to begin the day's work. Not as solitary physician, but as mentor and perhaps, in time, something more. Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Now let's get back to our story. Chapter 4. Spring arrived in Dakota Territory, melting snow into muddy streets. 2 months had transformed Emma from rejected mail-order bride to respected medical apprentice, a transition drawing increasing attention from the community. One April morning, while Dr. Winters made house calls, 3 women entered the office: Olivia Harper, Beatrice Campbell, and Margaret Wilson. We've come on a matter of community concern, Olivia announced, her gaze traveling disapprovingly from Emma to the twins playing nearby. The doctor is making house calls, Emma replied. I'd be happy to assist with medical concerns in his absence. This is precisely our concern, Beatrice sniffed. A woman presuming to provide medical care without proper training. Emma straightened. I serve as Dr. Winters' apprentice, a position recognized by territorial statute. Women don't become doctors, Margaret exclaimed. It's unnatural. Several female physicians practice throughout the territory, Emma countered. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell graduated from medical college nearly 30 years ago. Riverdale has standards of propriety, Olivia interjected. A woman living unchaperoned in a man's home creates talk. Heat rose in Emma's cheeks, but she remained composed. My position is entirely professional. Dr. Winters provides separate living quarters for me and my children. Before the conversation could continue, Ruth Winters and Nancy Cooper arrived with lunch. Ruth, as the doctor's sister-in-law and a respected founding resident, immediately changed the dynamic. We came to discuss community standards, Olivia explained stiffly. I can't imagine what standards apply to medical care beyond competence and compassion, Ruth replied calmly, both of which Mrs. Mitchell provides in abundance. A young widow living in a bachelor's home, apprenticing in medicine, it's highly irregular, Beatrice clarified. So was typhoid fever taking half our children before Daniel established his practice, Ruth countered. If irregular arrangements save lives, I'll champion them gladly over outdated proprieties. The visitors departed shortly thereafter. Ruth later revealed that Olivia harbored resentment because Daniel had chosen to marry Ruth's sister instead of her years ago. An unexpected insight that left Emma unsettled. On Sunday, Dr. Winters formally introduced Emma as his registered medical apprentice during church. This appointment recognizes Mrs. Mitchell's intelligence and natural healing abilities, he announced. Riverdale will benefit greatly from having additional medical expertise, particularly for women's and children's ailments. The congregation's response was mixed, but several women approached afterward to offer congratulations. The following day, Oliver Harper arrived at the office with an ultimatum from the town council. Either formalize your relationship through marriage, replace her with a male assistant, or face official censure. Shock rendered Emma speechless. Without a business license renewal, Dr. Winters would be forced to relocate outside town boundaries. You've created nothing, Daniel assured her when she apologized. This is about control, not morality. Harper's never forgiven me for old business disputes. Nevertheless, your practice shouldn't suffer because of my presence. Perhaps I should, Don't, he interrupted, his voice softening. Don't suggest leaving, Emma. Whatever Harper and his allies attempt, we'll face it together. The conviction in his voice steadied her, but the merchant's ultimatum echoed in her mind. The options felt equally impossible, and the coming confrontation unavoidable. Chapter 5. Winters was 10 miles away at Jensen Place. Mrs. Mitchell knew exactly what to do, saved Mary's life before he could even get there. His weathered face hardened as he looked at Harper. "I don't much care about appearances when weighed against my wife's life." Farmer Thompson nodded agreement. "My Abigail won't see any doctor but Mrs. Mitchell for her female complaints. Says she suffered for years before having someone she could speak to openly." Mayor Wilson, sensing the council's division in the community sentiment, attempted compromise. Perhaps a formal chaperoning arrangement could address the propriety concerns while allowing Mrs. Mitchell's valuable work to continue. Or perhaps, Daniel said, rising to stand beside Emma, a more permanent solution is appropriate. He turned to face her directly, taking her hands in his. "Emma Mitchell, I intended a more private setting for this, but circumstances demand directness. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Partner in life, as you've become partner in my practice?" Gasps and murmurs erupted around the room. Emma's eyes widened at the public proposal, so different from their private discussion. Yet as she looked into Daniel's face, she saw not calculation, but genuine emotion, affection, respect, and something deeper that stirred answering feelings in her own heart. In that moment of connection, her doubts dissolved like morning mist under Dakota sunshine. This was no marriage of convenience or strategic alliance, but the natural culmination of a relationship built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and growing attachment that she now recognized had matured into love on both sides. "Yes," she replied with quiet certainty, "I will." The simple acceptance transformed the atmosphere instantly. Applause broke out from supporters, while even critics appeared mollified by the prospect of convention being satisfied. Only Olivia Harper maintained her stony expression, rising abruptly to exit the hall with dramatic indignation. Mayor Wilson seized the opportunity to conclude the contentious meeting. "Well, it appears concerns about propriety will be addressed through the most traditional means possible. Unless there are objections, I propose we consider this matter resolved and move to regularly scheduled business." As the meeting shifted to mundane town matters, Emma and Daniel slipped outside into the afternoon sunshine, still holding hands as they walked slowly toward home. "That was quite a performance," Emma said when they were beyond earshot of the hall. "Though I can't help wondering if you felt pressured by circumstances to make such a public declaration." Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "The public setting was expedient, I admit, but the sentiment behind it was entirely genuine." His eyes held hers with unwavering sincerity. "I've known since you stood up to Harper in my office that first day that you were a woman of exceptional character. What I couldn't have anticipated was how completely you would transform not just my practice, but my life." Emma felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I came to Riverdale seeking security, expecting to sacrifice independence for stability. Instead, I found a partnership I never imagined possible. Professional and personal." "Is that a yes under less dramatic circumstances?" Daniel asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath his calm exterior. In answer, Emma rose on tiptoes to press a gentle kiss to his cheek, her first such gesture, shocking in its public setting, yet perfect in its timing. "It's a yes without reservation or condition," she confirmed softly. "Not for appearance or convenience, but because I've discovered that the heart can heal and open again to possibilities I thought forever lost." Their return to the doctor's residence, soon to be their shared home in truth as well as appearance, was accompanied by congratulatory calls from neighbors and patients who had witnessed the proposal. Ruth greeted them at the door, her knowing smile suggesting she had anticipated this outcome long before either of them had recognized its inevitability. Inside, the twins babbled happily in their play area, unaware that their world had just shifted axis once again. James pulled himself up on unsteady legs, reaching toward Daniel with complete trust in his chubby hands. Sarah watched her brother with calculating eyes, clearly planning her own approach to mobility. As Emma observed Daniel lifting James with practiced ease, his expression one of genuine affection rather than obligation, she marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From rejected mail-order bride to respected medical apprentice to future wife and partner, each apparent setback revealing itself as a step toward unexpected happiness. "We'll need to write to the medical board," Daniel said pragmatically, though his eyes remained soft as he bounced James gently. "Your apprenticeship status changes somewhat as my wife, but there are precedents for husband-wife medical practices throughout the territory." "Practical considerations already," Emma teased, lifting Sarah as the little girl demanded equal attention. "We've been engaged for less than an hour." "Professional and personal," Daniel replied with a smile that transformed his serious features. "That's our partnership, isn't it? In all aspects of life." The simple truth of his statement settled over Emma like a benediction. Whatever challenges lay ahead, from Harper's continued opposition to the everyday difficulties of frontier medicine, they would face them together, their unexpected family forged not from conventional beginnings, but from mutual respect, shared purpose, and love that had bloomed in the most unlikely soil. Chapter 6, a new chapter. The Riverdale church had never looked more beautiful than on this early June morning. Wildflowers gathered from the surrounding prairie filled simple mason jars along the pews, their vibrant colors standing bright against the whitewashed walls. Sunlight streamed through windows thrown open to catch the gentle breeze, carrying the sweet scent of early summer across the gathered congregation. Emma stood in the small antechamber, Ruth Winters making final adjustments to her dress. Ivory silk that had once belonged to Elizabeth Winters, carefully altered to fit Emma's slighter frame. The past 6 weeks since the town council meeting had passed in a whirlwind of preparation, both for the wedding and for the expansion of the medical practice that would follow. "Elizabeth would be pleased," Ruth said softly, smoothing the delicate lace at the collar. She always hoped Daniel would find happiness again. "I wish I could have known her," Emma replied, touching the cameo brooch Ruth had insisted she wear, a family heirloom passing from one Winters bride to the next. "From everything you've shared, we would have been friends. Sisters, more likely." Ruth blinked rapidly, controlling emotion with practiced dignity. "You share her practical nature and her unwillingness to accept arbitrary limitations." She stepped back to assess the final effect. "Perfect. Now, are the twins ready for their grand entrance?" Emma smiled, glancing to where 10-month-old Sarah and James sat in matching outfits, unusually clean and presentable thanks to Ruth's careful preparations. Both babies had begun crawling with determination, James slightly ahead in motor skills, while Sarah excelled in verbal development. They would participate in the ceremony in their own way, carried by Ruth and Nancy as honorary attendants. "As ready as they'll ever be," Emma replied, "though I suspect James will attempt to escape the moment the ceremony begins." "Ethan is prepared for interception," Ruth assured her with a chuckle. "That boy has grown remarkably nimble since your children arrived." A gentle knock at the door announced Reverend Thomas. "It's time, Mrs. Mitchell." Dr. Winters appears to be wearing a groove in the floorboards with his pacing. Emma took a deep, steadying breath. Unlike her first wedding, a small, solemn affair overshadowed by wartime anxieties, this ceremony represented not desperate hope, but confident certainty. She had come to know Daniel Winters through daily interaction, professional partnership, and quiet evenings of conversation. Their foundation was built not on romantic illusion, but on mutual respect, shared purpose, and affection that had deepened into love through time and understanding. "I'm ready," she said, gathering her simple bouquet of prairie roses. The small church had filled to capacity, townspeople crowding the pews in their Sunday finest. Emma noted with satisfaction that the attendance included not just supporters, but former critics as well, all save Olivia Harper, whose conspicuous absence surprised no one. Even Oliver Harper sat in a back pew, his expression unreadable, but his presence a tacit acknowledgement that Riverdale had accepted this unconventional union. Daniel waited at the altar, tall and distinguished in his best black suit, his normally serious expression transformed by barely contained joy as Emma proceeded slowly down the aisle. Behind her came Ruth carrying Sarah and Nancy with James, both babies wide-eyed at the unusual gathering. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, traditional vows spoken with quiet conviction by both bride and groom. When Reverend Thomas invited Daniel to kiss his bride, the gentle touch of his lips against hers felt like both culmination and beginning, closing one chapter of their story while opening another filled with promise. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, James broke free from Nancy's arms, crawling with remarkable speed toward his mother and new stepfather. The laughter that rippled through the assembly dispelled any remaining formality as Daniel scooped up the determined infant, including him in their first moments as a family. The celebration continued at the doctor's residence, now officially the Winters family home, where tables had been set up in the garden for a community feast. Women from across Riverdale had contributed dishes, creating a spread that represented the town's diverse cultural heritage. Children played games on the lawn while adults mingled, conversations flowing more easily across social boundaries than ever before. Emma found herself continuously surrounded by well-wishers, many expressing genuine gratitude for her medical work. Mrs. Blackwell, whose difficult pregnancy Emma had monitored with particular care, proudly displayed her healthy 2-month-old daughter. Farmers' wives who had previously suffered in silence with women's complaints pressed her hands and whispered thanks for discreet treatments that had improved their quality of life. Even Mayor Wilson's wife, once part of the opposition delegation, approached with grudging respect. "I may have misjudged your intentions, Mrs. Winters," she acknowledged stiffly. "Your care for my granddaughter's scarlet fever was exemplary. Professional intentions often transcend personal differences," Emma replied diplomatically. "I'm gratified your granddaughter recovered fully." As afternoon mellowed toward evening, the gathering gradually diminished as families with young children departed for home. Daniel found Emma sitting on the garden bench, observing Ruth supervising the twins' interaction with other children. "Happy?" he asked, joining her with 2 glasses of Mrs. Henderson's renowned elderberry wine. "Completely," Emma confirmed, accepting the glass and leaning slightly against his shoulder. "Though I confess to some trepidation about tomorrow. Tomorrow would bring significant changes to their professional lives. With their marriage official, Emma's status would shift from apprentice to partner in the practice. The territorial medical supervisor was scheduled to visit, formalizing her expanded role and approving new credentials that would allow her to treat patients independently while continuing her medical education. Dr. Reynolds is progressive in his views, Daniel assured her. He supervised a husband-wife practice in Bismarck for years before accepting the territorial position. Your qualifications speak for themselves. Emma sipped her wine thoughtfully. It's not just the inspection. The arrival of Dr. Bennett next month means even greater changes to our practice. The recruitment of young Dr. Thomas Bennett, recently graduated from medical school in Chicago, had been Daniel's inspiration. The new physician would manage routine cases in town, freeing Daniel to establish regular circuits to outlying homesteads and mining camps where medical care had been sporadic at best. Emma would focus increasingly on women's and children's medicine, creating a specialized practice unique in the territory. Change brings opportunity, Daniel reminded her, his fingers intertwining with hers. Bennett's presence means expanded care for the entire region, while allowing us more predictable schedules and time for our family. Our family, Emma added softly, her gaze finding the twins, who were now drowsing on a blanket under Ruth's watchful eye. They're growing so quickly. Daniel followed her gaze, his expression softening into the tenderness she had come to cherish. James has my medical texts memorized by location, if not content. He reorganized my reference shelf yesterday while I wasn't looking. Emma laughed. While Sarah has apparently appointed herself record keeper, I found her with the patient ledger this morning, making very serious marks with a pencil stub she must have found under your desk. Medical inclinations already, Daniel observed with evident pride, though I suspect they'll forge their own paths when the time comes. As the garden emptied of guests and twilight softened the landscape, Emma and Daniel sat together in comfortable silence, the twins now asleep in their improvised outdoor cradle. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but for now, this moment of quiet contentment was enough. Emma thought back to that snowy day just 4 months earlier, when she had stepped from the stagecoach with her babies clutched to her chest and her heart full of desperate hope. The journey that had begun with rejection had led her to something far better than she had dared to imagine. Not just security, but purpose. Not just shelter, but home. Not just a provider, but a partner. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That life rarely follows the path we expect," she replied, resting her head against his shoulder. "Sometimes it leads us through darkness before revealing unexpected light. And sometimes," he added, pressing a kiss to her temple, "what seems like a detour becomes the journey itself." As stars appeared in the deepening sky above Riverdale, Emma Mitchell Winters gave silent thanks for unanswered prayers and broken promises that had led her exactly where she needed to be. The future stretched before them, not perfect or without challenges, but rich with possibility and anchored in the shared conviction that they would face whatever came together, as equals and partners in all things. In the Dakota Territory, where winters were harsh and survival never guaranteed, they had found something precious, a family forged not by blood or convention, but by choice and love, the most powerful healing of all. Wow, what a story! And there is more coming. Don't forget to subscribe to not miss a new stories.